observing countries on the move, still rooted in tradition. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson, Monday through Friday on CNN.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
To try to overturn the 2020 presidential election here in the United States. Our congressional correspondent Ryan Nobles is joining us from Capitol Hill. So Ryan, tell our viewers what you're learning.
Yeah, that's right, Wolf. This marks an increase in the Department of Justice investigation into the former President Donald Trump and his allies' efforts to overturn the election results. They are investigating John Eastman, the conservative lawyer who was at the center of that effort to try and pressure the former Vice President Mike Pence to stand in the way of the certification of the election results. Now, Eastman is claiming in a court filing that a group of federal investigators from the Inspector General's office of the Justice Department and the FBI stopped him as he was leaving a restaurant with his wife and a friend. They searched him and then asked for access to his phone. They were able to seize the phone, and that means the information that was on that phone is part of their investigation. Now, Eastman believes that that seizure was illegal. He's complaining about it. That's how we learned of this, through a court filing. Now, Wolf, this information about the Department of Justice's interest in Eastman comes as the January 6th Select Committee, which has had a heavy focus on Eastman, has announced plans for a surprise hearing that is scheduled to take place tomorrow. You'll remember that last week, the committee had said that they were going to take a break in their hearing schedule and not pick up again until the middle of July. Well, that all changed this afternoon when they announced that they had a witness that they wanted to bring out to the public to share information about what they know about the investigation. At this point, Wolf, we do not know who that witness is, but the fact that the committee is rushing to bring this out into the light of day suggests that the information is significant. Wolf?
Is there a sense, Ryan, that this newly obtained evidence by the Select Committee could be time sensitive?
It certainly seems to have all the markings of that, Wolf. As we said before, the committee had plans to take a step back. They were collecting new information that had come in as a result of their first round of hearings. They weren't planning to have anything additionally be done in public until the middle of July, and most of the members had left town. The July 4th recess is now in effect for members of Congress, so there was no reason for them to be in Washington. We're now told that these members are making their way back to Washington, D.C. to be a part of this surprise, what many might even describe as an emergency hearing. It makes it seem as though the information that they want to deliver in tomorrow's hearing does have a degree of time sensitivity to it. Wolf?
Certainly does. It's pretty dramatic indeed. Ryan, I want you to stand by. I also want to bring in former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. He's a CNN senior law enforcement analyst and CNN political analyst Maggie Haberman, the Washington correspondent for the New York Times. Andrew, so these FBI agents, and you're a former FBI director, the FBI agent seized Eastman's phone as he was walking out of a restaurant, made him unlock it. What does that say to you about this investigation?
Well, I mean, it's yet another signal that this investigation is well developed and it's still in a very dynamic stage. So let's remember, Wolf, that in order to get a search warrant, which they had, to seize this phone, those agents had to first go to a federal judge and convince a federal judge that they had probable cause to believe that there was evidence of a crime on that phone. The execution of that warrant on Mr. Eastman as he left a restaurant is a little bit unconventional. But let's remember, the reason getting your hands on the phone is so important right now is because we know that Mr. Eastman and others involved in this conspiracy utilized encrypted messaging platforms like Signal and WhatsApp and things like that. So the only way to get the content from those messages is to have an actual phone that the messages were sent to. So this could potentially give the prosecutors a great degree of visibility into Eastman's actual communications with other people who may have been involved in a conspiracy to overturn the election.
Yeah, it's a very dramatic. It happened on the same day last Friday that a senior Justice Department official, Jeffrey Clark, his home was raided by the FBI as well. How significant, Maggie, is all these developments? Knowing Eastman, for example, was in direct contact with then President Trump in these key moments around January 6th.
Well, look, as Andrew said, this is showing that there is an active investigation involved. Where it goes remains to be seen. But the fact that there was such an aggressive step taken to get hold of this device while, according to him, he was leaving a restaurant paints quite a scene of a sense of urgency. Again, where it goes, whether it stops here, how much of a focus they're putting on former President Trump, I don't think we're going to know that for a little bit of time. But it certainly makes clear that the Justice Department has an active, at least one active investigation going into events related to January 6th.
Certainly does. Andrew, this comes as the Select Committee suddenly today added a hearing tomorrow when originally they were supposed to be taking a break until next month. So what new evidence or testimony would warrant a sudden announcement like this?
It's a great question, Wolf, and I wish I had the answer for it. But I tell you what we do know. We know that the committees have been very focused on telling a story in a compelling and engrossing way. They've done that so far. We also know that they created a fair amount of momentum with their last hearing last Thursday about the pressure that the Trump administration exerted on the Justice Department. My guess, and it's purely a guess, is that rushing this hearing onto the schedule now indicates that what they're going to present tomorrow, either in the form of evidence or witness testimony, is relative to what they presented on Thursday, a continuation of that same story. It's like they want to keep that momentum going to kind of close out the story in its finality. So that makes you think that it could be a piece of evidence relative to what we heard last week, or potentially a witness, someone who maybe was talked about at the hearing last week and now has changed their mind and decided to come in and be questioned. It's really hard to say, but I would say it's probably related directly to last week's testimony.
Could be very, very dramatic indeed. And you've done a lot of reporting on all of this, Maggie. Given the methodical way this committee, the Select Committee, has approached all this so far, are you surprised they would announce a new hearing on such short notice?
I think we all were surprised, Wolf, that they were announcing this hearing in such a dramatic fashion, and I think it'll be obviously very interesting to see what they present tomorrow. There's one other piece of information that wasn't discussed just now that the committee got hold of last week, and that is these 11 or so hours of film from a documentary filmmaker who was spending time around the Trump family and sometime around former President Trump himself in the immediate lead up to the election and then in that period afterwards. And they were looking at that they were looking at all of that film, looking at the interviews. There were 3 of them that the filmmaker Alex Holder did with former President Donald Trump, and a number of interviews with some of his family members. So it also could relate to that. There are a number of options. However, this has been a very dramatic buildup, and so it will be interesting to see what emerges.
Yeah, it certainly will be, and we'll be watching every moment of that. Ryan, does announcing a hearing on such short notice raise the stakes for the committee to actually deliver? You're up there on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that, Wolf. The way that this has gone down, especially when they made such a big deal about taking such a big break, raises the stakes for this hearing tomorrow. And they really do have to deliver, because a big part of what this committee is trying to do is win in the court of public opinion, and also try and convince and put pressure on the Justice Department to take action with what they've uncovered in their investigation. And I do think part of this, Wolf, is that I think the committee to a certain extent has been surprised by the amount of new information that has been generated by witnesses and other people who've been watching these hearings, and it's either jogged their memory or perhaps convinced them that they need to be a part of this investigation and contribute what they know. So there's also a distinct possibility that what we see tomorrow is someone who has come forward after seeing what has already taken place in these hearings and saying, I have an important piece of information to add, and I want to be a part of this. Again, Wolf, they're keeping such a tight lid on it. It is still very much a secret. We may not know until they gavel in tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern.
Yeah, I suspect we won't know until the hearing actually begins, but I could be wrong. Andrew, what do you make of this flurry of activity now coming from the U.S. Justice Department at the same time that the Select Committee is holding these public hearings? Is there anything to that timing?
Wolf, I actually think the timing was a bit of an unfortunate circumstance for DOJ, because people are quite naturally try to link the two, the search warrant on Jeffrey Clark's home, and of course now we know about the search warrant on Eastman's phone, and it all happening right around the time of last week's hearing. It is more likely that they are just at that point in their investigation where they're ready to take some overt steps like executing search warrants, which at that point the gig is up, right? The public knows that these people are under investigation, and that signals a very profound turn in the investigation. I think that timing probably just happened to coincide with last week's hearing, but we'll never know.
It's always sensitive to get a search warrant for a high-ranking former Justice Department official or for the president's lawyer in this kind of matter. That's not an easy decision to make for the Justice Department. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Guys, thank you very much. Maggie Haberman, Andrew McCabe, and Ryan Nobles. Just ahead, a nation divided over the end of Roe versus Wade is now struggling to navigate a patchwork of different state bans on abortion. Stand by for that. Also stand by for a CNN exclusive. Vice President Kamala Harris, her first interview since the ruling. Stay with us. You're in The Situation Room.
Across Africa, businesses are working together like never before. All new on CNN, Connecting Africa.
Join me and Lenny Jarkas as we crisscross the continent to show you how new connections are revolutionizing commerce in Africa. This month, Connecting Africa from the Africa CEO Forum here in Côte d'Ivoire.
This forum really brings Africans together.
Connecting Africa on CNN in association with Afreximbank.
Fundamentally, the world is changing very rapidly because of technology and globalization, and people need to learn new skills. And if they do, there's a wide range of new opportunities for new jobs if people get skilled up. So we think this is going to persist far beyond the pandemic. There's a lot of interest for individuals coming directly to Coursera Online to take professional certificates, to learn the skills, to get new digital careers. But the other thing that we're seeing is that businesses are realizing that embracing technology, going digital, moving to the cloud, using AI makes them more competitive. And so businesses are upskilling their employees using Coursera. And now, post-pandemic, universities and colleges all around the world, even as students come back to campus, they're realizing that integrating online learning into the way that students learn is a great way to provide flexibility and also access to emerging skills.
Today, we live in an unpredictable environment, and news races around the world at breakneck speed.
The missile struck right here.
My show brings you the latest news and top news makers.
What is your interpretation of Putin's intention? What does President Putin think he has achieved in Ukraine? What are the UN and other countries doing for you? What do you think an end to this looks like?
We just want to say stop to Vladimir Putin.
Amanpour, tonight on CNN.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 80,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore cnn.com/impact. Click to take action.
Tonight, Americans are grappling with the new reality that Roe versus Wade is gone and abortion bans are taking effect in states across the nation. CNN's Nadia Romero has more on the unfolding consequences of the U.S. Supreme Court decision.
Chaos and confusion after Friday's Supreme Court ruling, allowing states to immediately begin to set their own abortion policy, leaving women across the country with varying levels of access. At least 10 states have effectively banned abortion. They're among more than 24 states which are certain or likely to ban abortions once Roe was overturned, according to the Guttmacher Institute. That includes Mississippi, where this morning the state's attorney general certified a trigger law. It goes into effect in 10 days and prohibits abortion with few exceptions.
The task now falls to us to advocate for the laws that empower women, laws that promote fairness in child support and enhance enforcement of it.
The decision prompting Mississippi to take a hard look at its current laws to protect women and kids. It ranks 50th, dead last, for overall child well-being, based on several factors including health and education.
It has been surprising to me, actually, to hear the leadership, the governor, the speaker, the lieutenant governor, talking about what they're going to do for women's health when they won't even expand Medicaid, which would give women health care in this state.
A trigger ban in Texas will go into effect 30 days after Friday's ruling. But the state's attorney general already announced that local prosecutors can begin enforcing a 6-week ban passed last year before Roe was overturned. Providers in Oklahoma, which has implemented a trigger ban, say they're worried about the resources for underprivileged women.
We gave resources to all of the patients with other clinics, names and phone numbers out of state, as well as resources that could help pay for the abortion and help pay for travel to get to those states.
In other states, things are less clear-cut. In Michigan, the governor filed a motion urging the state Supreme Court to review a lawsuit to protect abortion rights. A 1931 law in the books there would ban abortion without exceptions for rape and incest.
There's a lot of confusion about what this means for IVF, for practitioners.
And an appeals court is set to rule on Georgia's fetal heartbeat law, which would ban abortion about 6 weeks into a pregnancy.
As the next governor, I'm going to do everything in my power to reverse it.
Meanwhile, some Republican governors are signaling they'll take action to block access to FDA-approved abortion pills.
In South Dakota, we've already had a bill pass that said on telemedicine abortions that we don't believe it should be available because it is a dangerous situation for those individuals.
My body, my choice. Nationwide, protests were peaceful with a few exceptions. Police made several arrests in Oregon and Arizona. The LAPD also clashing with protesters over the weekend, knocking Full House actress Jodie Sweetin to the ground as a group of officers tried to block access to the freeway. And in Iowa, a protester was hurt when a truck pushed through a crowd crossing the street.
He ripped my side and pushed me down, drove off.
And there are legal challenges underway. Just this afternoon, a Louisiana judge blocked the trigger laws on abortions in that state. The lawsuit argues that they are unconstitutionally vague. A hearing is set for July 8th. Here in Mississippi, the staff at the state's last abortion clinic, the pink house behind me, well, they are pushing forward with their lawsuit, arguing that the state guarantees individual rights to privacy separate and apart from the U.S. Constitution, further asking the court to ban the state's abortion ban. And Wolf, we will have to keep a close watch on both states as both cases move forward.
Excellent reporting, Nadia Romero, for us. Thank you very much. Coming up, CNN's exclusive interview with Vice President Kamala Harris. She's speaking out about the U.S. Supreme Court decision on Roe and whether Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh told the truth during their Senate testimony.
I'm Delia Gallagher in Rome, and this is CNN.
troops, they are Russian. I've spoken to the commander. He said they are now in control. Move on that way. It's a secret location. They're going to fire on Russian forces. There has been a ferocious battle here. There's unexploded grenades everywhere. We're being shown the powerful American guns, giving them an edge.
You downplayed the US intelligence assessment. Do you now regret that?
I'm in Kiev right now, and it is under attack, Mr. Lavrov, from Russian forces. I'm being told by our security that we need to get our flak jackets on. No matter where you are in this country, lives are being shattered. There are thousands streaming out. It is at least a chance to save their own lives. Matthew Chance, CNN.
Advancement, adaptation, new Marketplace Middle East.
Find out why water is the new blue gold.
Marketplace Middle East, Saturday on CNN.
Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world.
Out front tonight, a potential breakthrough in treating coronavirus.
We've gotten very little help from the federal government.
Could all this spending lead to a bigger economic crisis? One of our viewers saw you last night on the show. She says she's going to pay your rent this month. Shut up. I want to go now to an incredible story of survival. Would you do it all again in terms of being a nurse, knowing that that could put you at risk for this?
I want to help people more than I ever have.
Aaron Burnett out front, tonight on CNN.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Tonight, a CNN exclusive. The highest-ranking woman ever to serve in the U.S. government is sharing her take on the end of Roe versus Wade. Vice President Kamala Harris sat down with our chief political correspondent, Dana Bash, for her first interview since the U.S. Supreme Court decision.
There will be women who have babies who don't have the means to support the babies. Will the federal government act at all to increase support there?
I'm so glad you raised that point, because I'm going to say this. And here is the abject, obvious hypocrisy. Those people who say that they do not want to allow a woman to choose to make the decision with her priest, with her rabbi, with her pastor, that instead the government is going to interfere and make the decision for her. Those same people are the ones who voted against the extension of the child tax credit. The same ones who voted against a tax cut for families to pay for child care. The same ones who are voting against paid family leave. The same ones who vote against putting resources into public schools. I said I was doing the work on maternal mortality. We're pushing to say that, for example, Medicaid should be extended for postpartum care from 2 months to 12 months. These are the same people who reject the notion of expansion of Medicaid.
Can the president do any of what you just talked about with his pen, without Congress?
Listen, we have, as a democracy, invested in Congress an incredible amount of power. And specifically the power to create laws. And so we are going to require and depend on Congress to see this through, which means we do need to have the numbers in Congress who are willing to say that they stand for supporting women in every way, including women and men as parents, and all of the cost of being a parent.
So let me ask you about that. You're saying now, the president said that this fall Roe is on the ballot. But what do you say to Democratic voters who argue, wait a minute, we worked really hard to elect a Democratic president and vice president, Democratic-led House, a Democratic-led Senate. Do it now.
But do what now? What now? I mean, listen, what we did, we extended the child tax credit for the first year.
Well, I'm sorry, when I say do what,
Yeah.
do it now.
Yeah.
Act legislatively to make abortion rights legal.
We feel the same way. Do it now. Congress needs to do it now in terms of permanently putting in place a clear indication that it is the law of the land that women have the ability and the right to make decisions about their reproductive care, and the government does not have the right to make those decisions for a woman.
So one of the ways you can do it, obviously, one of the only way that is legislatively, procedurally possible is by doing away with the filibuster on this issue. President Biden told my colleague Anderson Cooper he would be okay with eliminating the filibuster to pass voting rights and, quote, maybe more. Would you support eliminating the filibuster in order to pass federal legislation for abortion rights?
Right now, given the current composition of the Senate, the votes aren't there.
But would you use the bully pulpit to say, yes, I support it?
Well, here's the thing. I understand why you're asking the question, but the reality of it is we don't even get to really answer that in terms of whether it happens or not if we don't have the numbers in the Senate. And again, that's why I keep coming back to the importance of an election that is only 130 odd days away, because it really does matter. I sit as the vice president, therefore the president of the Senate. I was in the Senate for 4 years representing the state of California. And if you don't have the votes, you can't move anything. We've seen countless examples, sadly, of that. This Senate, in the current composition, would not pass voting rights legislation.
Right.
I sat in the chair when the Women's Health Act was on the floor for a vote, and we didn't have the votes to get it passed on the issue of Roe, of reproductive health care. So the numbers are not there, and we can't de-emphasize the significance of that.
As the vice president, as the president of the Senate, do you have a position on, I know you don't have a vote on it, but do you have a position on whether the filibuster should be eliminated?
I think the president has spoken on that issue. And
well, he said and more, he kind of left the door open. Is this where he was leaving the door open to?
I think that he has been clear about where we stand on this issue of reproductive health and what the president and our administration have within our toolkit to do. And so far, that's what we've been pursuing.
You were a senator when now Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh testified about many issues, including obviously Roe, at their confirmation hearings. Now Justice Gorsuch said it had been reaffirmed many times. Kavanaugh called it precedent on precedent. At that particular hearing, you were there. Some senators say that they intentionally misled the public and the Congress. What do you think?
I never believed them. I didn't believe them. That's why I voted against them.
Do you think that there's anything to be done now? I mean, they were under oath.
I think that, listen, it was clear to me when I was sitting in that chair as a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee that they were not, that they were very likely to do what they just did. That was my perspective, that was my opinion, and that's why I voted like I did.
Big picture, do you worry about two Americas now because of the patchwork of different states having different laws now that Roe v. Wade is no longer law of the land?
I don't believe we have two Americas. I believe that when you look at an issue, for example, like abortion and Roe, the majority of Americans support the right of a woman to make decisions about her body. When you look at something like the issue of the need for reasonable gun safety laws, the majority of people, including one of the numbers I've seen, the majority of gun owners agree we should have reasonable gun safety laws. So I don't buy into the idea that we have two Americas. What does concern me is that the rhetoric that you see among certain elected officials is actually not representative of where the people actually are. And we need to listen to where the people actually are. The vast majority of people, I think, have so much more in common than what separates them, and they want us to lead in terms of those who hold elected offices in a way that is reflective of their daily needs and their priorities. So, for example, supporting parents with a tax cut for child care expenses, which we have done as an administration, extending the child tax credit so that, as we did in the first year, we brought down child poverty by almost half. Doing the work of saying we are going to focus on an issue like maternal mortality because rural women, Black women, Native women are almost equally impacted in terms of the disparities of those outcomes. That's what people want.
Speaking of disparities and just overall anxiety, I want to ask you about the economy.
Yeah.
There is a lot of anxiety about the economy. People's wallets are really being hurt. Right now, gas prices, as you well know, they're still near about $5 a gallon. The president said he wanted a gas tax holiday. It doesn't seem like it's going anywhere in Congress. What else is in your toolbox? Is there anything else you can do to help bring down the cost of gas?
Well, first of all, let's just say that this is a very real issue. And we have to do something about it. And it's one of our highest priorities as an administration. So there is the piece that is about gas and bringing down the cost of gas, which in large part has exploded because of Putin's war in Ukraine. The president is in Europe right now, talking, as he has been, to bring our allies and partners together so we can have a common defense around what we believe to be democratic principles around sovereignty and territorial integrity. But there are other things we need to do. And so, for example, bringing down the cost of prescription drugs. We are fighting to say something like insulin should cost no more than $35 a month. We are fighting to say that we should have affordable child care so that working families shouldn't pay more than 7% of their income in child care.
But you've been fighting for that since day one.
And we're going to keep fighting for that.
But now inflation is really high. Are you concerned about a recession? The administration said that they weren't that worried about inflation, and then that changed.
I think that there can be no higher priority than what we have been clear is our highest priority, which is bringing down the costs and the prices as much as we possibly can, and we will stay focused on that.
I just want to ask you quickly about January 6th.
Okay.
You are a prosecutor by training and by lots of experience. Based on the evidence presented so far in the January 6 hearings, would you bring criminal charges against the former president, Donald Trump?
As a former prosecutor, I never comment on another prosecutor's case.
I understand that. The former Vice President, Mike Pence, has your opinion of him changed?
Well, I think that he did his job that day, and I commend him for that because clearly it was under extraordinary circumstances that he should not have had to face, and I commend him for having the courage to do his job.
Last question. I know we're out of time.
Sure.
Your friend, the Congressman Jim Clyburn, said last week that if President Biden doesn't seek re-election, you would be first on his list in 2024. Have you talked to President Biden about re-election? And what do you say to Congressman Clyburn?
Joe Biden is running for re-election, and I will be his ticket mate.
Full stop.
Full stop. That's it.
Madam Vice President, thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
Very strong interview indeed. Dana's with us in the Situation Room right now. Dana, thanks so much for doing that. Really important. She also, I understand, told you that from her perspective, the U.S. Supreme Court is not done by any means.
No, it was really interesting. We talked about that concurring opinion that Clarence Thomas wrote last Friday, and where he said pretty specifically that the court should reconsider other cases that deal with things like same-sex marriage, contraception, intimacy issues. And she answered, I definitely believe this is not over. She said that Thomas said the quiet part out loud. I think that's why we all must really understand the significance of what just happened, and she called it profound.
Very important interview. Thanks very much,
Thanks,
Dana,
Wolf.
for excellent work as usual. Dana Bash helping us appreciate what's going on, as she always does. Just ahead, the death toll is now climbing after Russia launched an airstrike at a shopping mall in central Ukraine. What President Biden and other G7 leaders are pledging to do in the wake of this brutal attack.
I'm Jumana Karachi in Istanbul, and this is CNN.
Our mission is to see this young generation of leaders growing up make change in the world. My name is Edlira Debrani, and I'm the Communications Officer of Finnish School of Kosovo here in Kosovo, Europe. We created a Wall of Freedom, which is still in our halls. We organized a bake sale where we collected over 500 euros, which are going to be donated to an organization against domestic violence. I would say the one that we are most proud of is the Set in Stone Garden. For over a month, each student gathered rocks. We took these rocks, we wrote down our vows and pledges to end modern-day slavery, and then we took all those rocks outside in the middle of our schoolyard, and we spelled out My Freedom Day. So we had this really cool shot where everybody was shouting out My Freedom Day, sort of like a symbolic way to say that our pledges are actually set in stone and they will remain there forever. This, I believe, has made a very long-lasting impact on them, and it's something that they have vowed to actually take on in the following months. You'll see them around the school still doing other things for My Freedom Day.
He's interviewed 5 U.S. presidents, authored 7 books, and has an independent voice that resonates.
What happened to when we were united against a common enemy?
He's raw, unique, and one of America's most important talk show hosts. Watch Smerconish, Saturday on CNN.
My name is Naif Al-Fayez. I'm the Minister of Tourism and Antiquities for the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. We felt the impact of COVID not only on the big corporation, we felt it on smaller SMEs, less fortunate people, less fortunate industries. After a very tough 2 years, I think things are looking very optimistic and looking good. Recovery is starting. If you look at tourism and what it brings a lot of hope to the Jordanians. It brings a lot of hope for those who have been suffering for the last couple of years. I'm very optimistic, excited that recovery is coming back. Hopefully that with what we're seeing, that the recovery could be much faster than what we have anticipated.
When you take a step back and you see the Earth in its entirety, you understand that it's just an oasis in the cosmos. All around is nothing, no life, is blackness, emptiness. And there's this blue ball with everything we need to sustain human life and life in general, which is absolutely fragile. And it makes you want to cherish the Earth a little bit more. I'm Thomas Pesquet, I'm an astronaut for the European Space Agency. You can see a lot of the consequences of human activities from space. Some of them climate change, some of them just plain old pollution. It is definitely my experience of being in space and seeing it with my own eyes that made me want to advocate against climate change. I'm an ambassador for the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. We're trying to limit the production, the use of plastic, the production of waste, and so we came up with edible packaging, which is just such a fantastic and simple concept. We need foam to protect everything from shocks during launch into space. So what we did is we turned that foam into food. It's like gingerbread. Now our packaging is at the same time our source of food. It reduces the need to send cargo up. If we set ourselves on the right path, there's nothing we cannot do. We built that unbelievable facility in space. We're using it every day. I'm optimistic for the future. If we can make a space station fly, then we can save the planet.
A truly devastating attack in Ukraine today. Russia launched an airstrike at a Ukrainian shopping mall that left at least 13 people dead. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky calls it, quote, one of the most daring terrorist acts in European history. It happened as G7 leaders were gathering in Germany. Our White House correspondent, MJ Lee, is traveling with President Biden in Europe right now. MJ, Ukrainian President Zelensky addressed G7 leaders during a virtual meeting earlier today. What was his basic message?
Yeah, one of the big takeaways from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's meeting with the G7 leaders was how he laid out how he sees the trajectory of the war, namely that he would like to see the war end before the end of this year. He said that he would like Ukraine to regain momentum in a matter of months, not years, and that he really wants to maximize the use out of the next couple of months. Now, we also know that the President Zelensky, asked the leaders for more help, particularly when it comes to air defense systems of the variety that can shoot down Russian missiles while they are in the sky. And we also have reported, of course, on this front that the U.S. is getting ready to announce that it has purchased an advanced medium to long range surface-to-air missile defense system for Ukraine. But overall, Wolf, there was a collective message that we heard from all of the G7 leaders, and that was that they are willing to help Ukraine for as long as it takes. Wolf.
Yeah, it could be a while. As you know, MJ, Russia made a point of launching these new strikes at targets in Ukraine, including the capital of Kyiv, as well as this shopping mall in central Ukraine, as these G7 leaders were meeting. Was this designed by the Russians to send a direct message?
Yeah, first of all, let me just quickly note, because this tweet just came out from President Biden, he sent a message saying that this attack is cruel and that we stand in solidarity with the Ukrainian people. But just to your point just now, it is difficult to ignore sort of the overlapping timing of these two events. At the same time that we had President Biden meeting with these G7 leaders to essentially talk about how to bring this war to an end, we are seeing these horrific images coming out of Ukraine at this shopping mall where there were many people inside. We don't even know yet what the actual death toll is going to be. Certainly, this is going to be one of the driving factors, not just for President Zelensky, but for these G7 leaders, because they have been talking so much about the human suffering and the toll that it has taken on the Ukrainian people. So again, these horrific images coming out of Ukraine overlapping with this major meeting of the G7 leaders just really brings home the urgency behind this situation, Wolf.
Certainly does. And President Zelensky says there were 1,000 people in that Ukrainian shopping mall when the Russians launched that strike. MJ Lee, just before the strike, more than 1,000 people inside that shopping mall. MJ Lee, thank you very much for that update. I want to bring in CNN's Clarissa Ward. She's joining us now live. She's in London. Clarissa, does President Zelensky really have any say over how much longer this war will last, or will that decision ultimately come from the man who launched this brutal invasion, namely Vladimir Putin?
Well, Wolf, I don't think there's any one party who will have the ultimate say in how long this war lasts. Obviously, much has been made of Russia's momentum in eastern Ukraine. They have made significant progress there, but at the same time, it has been plodding, it has been incremental, and there has been a high level of attrition. It's not clear, while they've taken the vast majority of the region of Luhansk, whether they could push into Donetsk, whether they could encircle major cities like Slavyansk, for example, remains an open question. But I think the reason that you're seeing Zelensky come out with this sort of timeline, if you will, is because he understands, firstly, the crucial nature of this moment with all these NATO leaders meeting together this week, the West coming together, deciding how they're going to handle this coming forward, but also because he understands that there is a danger of fatigue creeping in with voters, particularly in Europe. And it's no accident that he talked about by the end end of the year, by winter. Of course, many here are concerned that with rising prices, with oil and gas, and with temperatures plummeting, you're going to see patients dwindling and support potentially from ordinary Europeans dwindling as well. And British Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned about this. He said, listen, we cannot fall prey to Ukraine fatigue, if you will, but certainly that will be in Zelensky's mind as he tries to impress upon Western leaders the importance of this moment.
U.S. officials, Clarissa, say Russia is stepping up these brutal missile strikes into Ukraine this week, including in the capital of Kyiv, as I said, and also earlier today at this busy shopping mall in central Ukraine. So what does that tell you about Russia's current strategy?
Well, I think what it tells you quite clearly, Wolf, is that Russia doesn't have any intention of backing down, that it's going to keep on doing what it has been doing. It has consistently shown a flagrant disregard for civilians throughout this war. I understand that it's been a little quieter in Kyiv over the past couple of months or the past few weeks, certainly. But it's important to remember when we're talking about missile strikes on Kyiv, when we're talking about a shopping mall in Poltava being hit by rockets, these are nowhere near the front line. And so the message certainly to the Ukrainian people is still, you're not safe anywhere in your country, and we are not going to take our foot off the gas or step down on the pressure. And again, the timing, no accident. 300,000, that is the new number that NATO will be announcing for their rapid response team. That's up from 40,000. So it's hard to believe that this is simply a coincidence as NATO leaders come together to participate in what the head of NATO has called a transformative meeting.
Yeah, striking a shopping mall with maybe 1,000 people inside, that's not a military target at all. That could looks to me like a potential war crime. Clarissa Ward, thank you very much. Coming up, Brittany Griner appears in a Russian court. Why that country now says it's extending the detainment for the WNBA star for another 6 months at least.
In 1917, Cartier came upon his breakthrough, revolutionary, by far most famous design, the Cartier tank. Now, the inspiration for this design was, as the name suggests, a British Mark IV tank.
For much of its history, it was an extremely exclusive watch. The tank was made in very small numbers until the mid-1960s. Cartier tanks from before the 1960s especially are tremendously collectible. It's an absolutely iconic design.
This became an elegant symbol, a very desirable watch. Through the ages, we have Jackie Onassis wearing this watch. We have Truman Capote, Andy Warhol, Duke Ellington, Jeff Goldblum. Team Tank is a stylish team indeed. It's a rectangular case and it has these very identifiable vertical sidebars called brancars. You can recognize a tank across the room.
This is the story of a kingdom.
Men rule
while American leaders look the other way. But when a young prince rises to power, there are new freedoms and there is murder. This is the story of Saudi Arabia, Kingdom of Secrets, Sunday on CNN.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers. Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Today on CNN.
I'm Ben Wiedemann in Ukraine, and this is CNN.
Brittany Griner appeared in a Russian court today. This comes as Russia has now set the trial for the WNBA star to begin this coming Friday. Griner has been detained on allegations of drug smuggling, but the State Department here in Washington says Griner is being, quote, wrongfully detained. CNN's Brian Tutt is here to break down what's expected for the trial and all the latest information. So what do you know, Brian?
Wolf, this trial not expected to go well for Brittany Griner. The Russian legal system, analysts say, is simply stacked against her. But some believe the sooner this trial gets started and can get resolved, the sooner the U.S. could strike a possible deal for Griner's release.
Brittany, do you have anything to say?
In handcuffs, flanked by hurried guards in black vests, Brittany Griner is escorted into court today and learns her detention has been extended by 6 months and that her trial on drug smuggling charges will begin this Friday.
The justice system, if you can call it that, in Russia has nothing to do with justice at all. It is an instrument of the Putin regime's political power. And so they have made a decision to keep her detained. And they want to do this probably in order to put pressure on the Biden administration.
The American basketball star has been detained for more than 4 months in Russia after being arrested at a Moscow airport. She was carrying what Russian authorities said was cannabis oil in her luggage. They accuse Griner of smuggling narcotics, punishable by up to 10 years in prison. The U.S. government has classified her as wrongfully detained, meaning her case is now the focus of the U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs. CNN sports analyst Christine Brennan says even if Griner's trial is a sham, it could bring a positive development.
They have to go through this. Russians can save face, they can convict her, and then they can say, okay, now what do we get in return? So as sad as that is, and as strange and bizarre as it sounds, this actually means the entire situation, as tragic as it is moving forward.
One scenario that is always coming up in public discussions now is the possibility of the Russians trading Griner or fellow American Paul Whelan, or both, for Victor Bout. He's a notorious arms dealer known as the Merchant of Death, now serving a long sentence at the U.S. Federal Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois.
He's a genuine criminal. He is a notorious figure. He has supplied arms to some of the worst conflicts in the world. So there's no comparison between the two.
Asked by CNN whether a trade for Bout is possible, Secretary of State Antony Blinken sidestepped it.
I've got no higher priority than making sure that Americans who are being illegally detained in one way or another around the world come home. And that includes Paul Whelan, that includes Brittany Griner.
Jason Rezaian, the Washington Post writer who was held in Iran for nearly a year and a half, believes there's a good chance that both Griner and Paul Whelan have spent significant time in solitary confinement while in Russian custody. So their mental health could be suffering.
Their mental health is definitely suffering, as is the mental health of all of these other Americans who are being held against their will simply because they are citizens of the United States of America.
Brittany Griner's agent has just tweeted that negotiations for Griner's immediate release should remain a top priority and that they expect President Biden and Vice President Harris to, quote, do everything in their power right now to get a deal done to bring her home. Considerable pressure on the Biden team tonight.
Let's hope she comes home soon. Thanks very much, Brian Todd, for that report. Just ahead, authorities just held a news conference on that Amtrak train that derailed in Missouri. We're going to tell you what we're learning about the crash. That's next.
It is actually very complicated to move money around the world. Few companies can do it at scale. Few companies can do it in the number of countries that we do it. And so these companies that come together, like MoneyGrams and like our competitors, do really provide a very unique service, and that is to instantly move money, get funds from